Is there something I can do to keep ice cream soft? I have bought an electric ice cream churner. I have tried so many different flavors, different recipes, used alcohols. Have read previous questions and I don't believe that leaving ice cream out to thaw, scoop, then refreeze is the only answer. How do the commercial companies keep them soft? I generally find the next day it is fairly reasonable to scoop, but day after day the longer it stays the harder it becomes.
Yes, actually, there are two magic ingredients. Guar gum, see link. 1. And xanthan gum, see link. 2. Guar gum is a thickener, but in small quantities can also prevent the growth of ice crystals which would cause the ice cream to harden into icicles. Xanthan gum is a stabilizer which helps keep air, called overrun, in the mixture. Air is generally churned into ice cream by ice cream machines, but it won't stay that way without the stabilizer. The magical ingredients for commercial ice cream are stabilizers, see link. 2. Emulsifiers, see link. 3. And really good freezers. As Aeronaut notes, see link. 4. Stabilizers can go a long way. Personally, watching a bowl of ice cream melt without losing its shape makes me a bit uncomfortable, so use in moderation. But if you don't happen to have any gum, see link. 5. Available. Here are a few suggestions drawn from my personal experience with home churning. You want air. Lots of air. My little, 1.5 quarts, churn came with a bunch of recipes starting out at 2/3 RDS of the final volume, 1 quart. That's enough if I want to serve it within a few hours, but since I don't have a blast freezer in my kitchen the end result tends to lose some air while hardening. I've found that aiming for a post-churn mixture where air is around 50% of the volume works much better. Start with a custard, yes, I mean eggs. Egg yolk. There's some additional fat in this, but you're working with cream so you should have plenty of that already. There are also emulsifiers and proteins, and I suspect this is where the real value comes in. Remember, the eventual goal is to end up with a sort of frozen foam stable enough to resist falling while hardening. It's also nice if you're able to mix in that air without turning the milk fat into butter. I aim for a maximum temperature of 140 degrees to 160 degrees Fahrenheit when cooking the custard, as this seems to provide sufficient texture without curdling. But if you do have problems with the mixture curdling, try using a double boiler. The final product should be thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, and you should chill it as quickly as possible, and you want it good and cold before trying to churn it, at least down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Use plenty of sugar. This is your anti-freeze. It won't keep ice crystals from forming, but it will keep the liquid from freezing solid. The more crystals form, the more concentrated the solution and the lower the freezing temperature. If you add the sugar to your custard, you can be sure it's properly dissolved. Sugar granules don't do you much good. Once frozen, your perception of the sweetness will decrease, so if you're tasting as you go along, don't be afraid to go a bit beyond what you'd normally be comfortable eating. Use heavy cream. Well, this should be a given, but the lower the milk fat content, the more water and hence more ice you'll end up with. You can combat this with more sugar, but you'll still have trouble whipping in enough air because you'll have less fat to stabilize it. Harden it fast, store it cold. You probably don't have a way to blast freeze the final product either, but you can still do your best. Make sure your deep freeze is as cold as possible. I keep mine at or below -10 degrees Fahrenheit. Put the ice cream into small, thin-walled containers. I reuse pint-size yogurt containers, and bury them in frozen veggies. Using multiple containers has the advantage of letting you take one out to consume without exposing the rest to room temperature, but more importantly it increases surface area. If you must put it all in a single container, try to find a wide, shallow one. And once you have it cold, keep it cold. The longer it takes to freeze, the bigger the ice crystals will be, but the colder you keep it once frozen the less they'll grow over time. You'll also lose less air if you can avoid freeze, rethaw styles. Not so much of an issue if you want to eat it tomorrow, but critical if you're aiming for soft creamy goodness a week or two out. Avoid auto-defrosting freezers for this same reason. Experiment. There are a lot of variables here. Fat content, sugar, other ingredients, the design of your churn and temperature of your freezer, ambient temperature, altitude, container size, personal taste. Don't be afraid to play around with things until you hit a recipe and process that you're happy with. It took me a couple of days to get comfortable making vanilla ice cream, but several months of trial and error, wonderful, delicious trial and error, to get a pumpkin ice cream I was happy with. Fortunately, it's fairly easy to find folks willing to help eat your mistakes.